Welcome back to the Partnership and Participatory Engagement session at the Ideas Synthesis Workshop here in Houston. We're lucky to have Chris Lewicki joining us through Adobe Connect, and we will be pulling him in virtually. So why don't we turn over to Chris. Real quick before we do that, hashtag Asteroid Partners to follow us online and submit your questions. And one quick thing for you, Chris, if you wouldn't mind staying on after the presenters are all finished, we'll have questions, and I know folks would likely have some for you. So if you wouldn't mind sticking around, that would be awesome. And with that,
absolutely, I can do that.
Great. And with that, I'll turn it over to you and your presentation. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. This morning I'm going to give you some of Planetary Resources' thoughts on participatory engagement with NASA and the U.S. government and private industry in meeting the goals of NASA's Asteroid Initiative. To start with, though, I wanted to speak a little bit on why we explore. To date, we've explored for scientific interest, for meeting questions of our solar system, how it began to form. But that's really starting to transition. We've learned a great deal in the last 50 years of space exploration. And as the President said in our own U.S. National Space Policy in 2010, which is on this page, we're transitioning to a way of exploration that's ultimately more sustainable and even indefinite. And in order for us to be able to do this, we think one of the critical ways and things we need to leverage are resources. The near-Earth asteroids in the solar system really have a tremendous amount of resources that can be leveraged for this, from water to precious minerals and the structural materials that we'll need to build future structures in space. And the asteroids themselves, of course, are extremely plentiful in these resources. So over time, we've been the benefit of an exploration program thus far between NASA and other space agencies that send a number of exploration spacecraft to small solar system bodies. The Near-Earth Asteroid Rendezvous Shoemaker mission to the first Near-Earth asteroid out to today's OSIRIS-REx. But these missions are becoming increasingly complex, increasingly expensive as a result, and unfortunately a bit less frequent. And this is something that, from a commercial standpoint, we would like to see the pace quickened in this area. And today we propose a way for a private-public partnership to enable that. So the idea is the creation of an incentive prize for the acquisition of asteroid data, a private-public partnership between the government and private industry. And this is something that's already been done before. NASA has one of these partnerships in place in the form of the Innovative Lunar Demonstrations Data, BAA. And this is underway today. 6 companies originally were selected for this. It further was down-selected to 3, and progress is underway for those teams who are competing for the Google Lunar X Prize. As it relates to asteroid data, this is something that can probably be achieved for less than the cost of a single discovery mission. We would have maybe perhaps through the end of the decade to return data in line with roadmaps that are in place today. And the award types would allow perhaps a half a dozen different companies to provide these types of data. So just as a notional overview, these are things that are gone through a selection process based on technical merit, business merit, and then ultimate value. And you have a detailed set of things that the businesses need to do, contract line items, and this is drawing directly on the language and the structure that has been created for the Lunar ILDD program. The process starts with a solicitation and an initial small award just to set things up, and then increases through more and more productive gates. Initially, activities might be done on Earth or in proximity to Earth. Follow-on milestones might include missions that go out to the vicinity of the asteroid or perhaps fly by Earth-crossing asteroids. But ultimately, and what is most value both to private industry as well to the government, are the rendezvous missions that help reduce the risk and characterize more and more of these small bodies in the solar system. To give you one example, going into the later stage activities, we could look to the third tier of these activities. And for example, an entire rendezvous mission could be conducted for a $50 million award. This would be something that would be paid upon receipt of the data. This is not a cost plus fixed fee program, but something that would require businesses to essentially risk the mission and develop this, but in doing so would know that in providing the data, the government would be a customer for it. So these milestones at the rendezvous point could mean touching down on the surface of the asteroid, perhaps for in situ science, the identification of potential human hazards, perhaps simulating human-appropriate approach and departure trajectories, and, of course, the extended duration science that you can get where you can characterize the asteroid's mass, volume, spin state, surface morphology, and perhaps even characterize other hazards like dust, or if there are moons present in the asteroid system. This is something that Planetary Resources is prepared to support, starting with our own internal activities of launching our core technology next year. And in the next several years, we have an increasingly more capable set of demonstrations, adding in those capabilities necessary to go into deep space, which include propulsion, the communications, and then ultimately the capabilities that allow you to perform science and prospect at an asteroid. So I want to leave with one other final point related to something that the government could start today, perhaps with no funds at all, and this is the opportunity for sponsored or rideshare access to solar orbit. This is being done in low Earth orbit, and actually was just recently done this week with a number of payloads on a variety of launch vehicles. But we see a situation where there are several missions that are launching to Mars or other destinations with excess capacity. The InSight Mars lander is an example that's launching with over a metric ton of excess capacity on the launch vehicle that it's currently on. The SLS demo flights that are coming up later this decade are an opportunity to get Earth escape trajectory and get demonstration or test payloads on that. And then even the Department of Defense has often had third stages, which after delivering a spacecraft to geostationary orbit, the third stages are disposed in solar orbit. So all this excess capacity could be of great benefit for an innovative and supportive environment for commercial activity. It helps to reduce the uncertainty associated with launch manifests and the schedules associated with them, the upfront costs with getting those manifests started. And then, of course, with a timetable on when these launches exist, there's certainly plenty of motivation to meet that schedule and to get the payload to that spacecraft. So this is something we'd love to see explored to allow more and more experimentation and innovation that can ride on investments that the government is already making. So Planetary Resources is ready to support NASA's objectives and goals with the Asteroid Initiative, and we look forward to what these private and public partnerships might allow in the future. So, Jen and Jason, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris. All right, next up is Scott Zivchek from Prospect Dynamics.
Good morning, Scott Zivchek from Prospect Dynamics, and I'm going to take a few minutes here to talk about opportunities that NASA has to reduce the barriers to entry for small businesses as a means to increase participatory engagement. Unfortunately, when it comes to early stage small businesses, we spend way too much time figuring out how to pay our employees rather than focusing on the technical challenges where we really are interested and really want to spend our time. There are two broad brush categories that NASA would have the opportunity to aid in. The first being a direct funding means, helping us reach the funding levels we need to move forward. The second, a more indirect means, and that is through leveraging NASA's visibility to aid us in gaining credibility, which we can then take out to help us find investment through other means. On the direct funding side, the intelligence agency built a model called InQtel that addresses a lot of the same challenges that exist for small businesses in the aerospace industry. And that is to use federal funding to fund a venture capital group to go out and find the technologies that are most significant, most relevant to that customer, and aid them in getting through the starting gate, so to speak. With the barriers to entry in aerospace, the long timelines and the significant capital investments required, this model is perhaps even more applicable and more valuable in this industry. Also, opportunities for relevant contract work. And now this would be specific to the Grand Challenge. Focusing SBIR topics, focusing other investment vehicles on the topics that are identified and needed for this Grand Challenge. Also looking at the paths to procurement and understanding really where some of the waste occurs. Just as an example, I've been looking at the NAIC solicitation that came out last week. The first step in that is a 3-page proposal. To submit that 3-page proposal, I need to understand and comply with about 130 pages of guidance and register on 4 different government websites for a 3-page proposal. So there are opportunities there to make it a little bit easier for a few more companies to get their ideas heard by NASA. And really this RFI was a great example of something simple to allow us to get information out. On the visibility side, there are ideas that are even easier. Something that would be worth its weight in gold to me is a letter of intent from NASA. This wouldn't have to be something that offers any real commitment, just an opportunity for us to submit an idea for review, and in the best of cases, have NASA provide back a letter stating that we've looked at this idea, the technology has merit, this guy can make it work. There might be a spot for it within the NASA architectures going forward. Retweets, even easier. NASA has a massive social media following. Providing and publicizing a hashtag that would allow us to request a retweet would be a very, very simple effort. And from that, NASA would simply need to review tweets tagged with this hashtag and make a decision as to which to bring forward. And then the big idea would be coordinated demonstrations. So talking about that specifically, what I have in mind for coordinated demonstrations focuses around demo day events. As each of us goes through the normal development life cycle, there are stages where we have natural demonstration points. And in many cases, those would be pretty uninteresting to anyone outside the organization. But over time, they get more interesting, more complex, and if we bring all of these ideas, all of these little development efforts that are going on across the industry, and bring them together, we can leverage the economies of scale, bring everybody into the same room, and build a lot of network effects out of that. It would start with technology road mapping, and not the high-level technology road mapping that is done and done very well at the strategic level, but the more tactical, detailed, technical road mapping within a specific area. So planetary defense, for example. What are the architectures that are being considered for a planetary defense architecture? And what is the trade space that branches back from those different architectures? Looking back through that trade space, what are the functionalities and capabilities that need to be demonstrated by certain technologies that need to be developed? Developing this lower level map would provide a go-to source for college students looking for ideas on relevant projects. It would provide an opportunity for businesses to go out and look and understand where they can best leverage their resources for the most bang for their buck. And it would provide NASA a scorecard. As we develop through this technology roadmap, NASA can see where and how we are developing and to which architectures. Identify if there are gaps, potential areas that need to be incentivized. From this road mapping come the demo day events themselves. We'll bring a lot of people together into a room, into a convention center potentially, going through a number of demonstrations of the technologies that they are developing individually. Coordinating for scale, you bring a lot of people together that then enable NASA to show the momentum that is being built. It provides opportunities for people to see what else is going on in industry and potentially find complementary demonstrations. And it allows for really investors and large businesses to come and see what's going on as a potential shopping spree for acquisitions. And then the big piece is a headline event. So right now we have 4, 5, 6 events a year that aren't these small demonstrations. They're big demonstrations, newsworthy on their own. And if we coordinate these smaller demos, these consolidated demos, with the headline events, then we essentially have the opportunity to take turns within industry providing the coattails for everyone else. So how would Prospect Dynamics leverage this structure? One of our focuses would certainly be within that roadmap as a key point, and that is anchoring or attachment technology. As we progress through the development, we'd participate in demo days with different interesting and engaging attempts at showing how the technology is progressing. In time, we would be ready for a low Earth orbit attachment demonstration, which could serve as a headline marquee demo for a demo day. I'll talk more about this slide in context 350 this afternoon in the asteroid deflection demonstration session, but it is relevant here as well. What we would do for a demonstration of attachment technology is demonstrate in low Earth orbit rather than going to an asteroid. We would lift potentially a handful of CubeSats enabled with an attachment capability, and then use space debris as an asteroid analog, attach to the space debris object, characterize its motion, and then change its orbit. This proves out the attachment capability in a potentially bold and very visible manner. And it also highlights a number of applications that a single technology can be used for, from the planetary defense application that I'll talk about this afternoon to space debris mitigation if the altered orbit is to deorbit. Potential applications for on-orbit servicing as well. So that is how we would engage the process. But back to the overall concept in reducing barriers to entry, funding via investments or simplified contracting, and visibility being a means to indirect funding, allowing us to go out into the investor community with the credibility of NASA behind us. And then this overall idea of coordinated demonstrations to allow for leveraging the economies of scale, establishing the technology roadmap so we know where we're going together in a coordinated fashion, and then providing this opportunity of bringing so many people together in the same room. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Next up, we have David Gump from Deep Space Industries.
Tag team.
And Rick Tumlinson to help.
To help. Okay, ready?
Please.
I was going to start this with hello sharks, but David won't let me do that pitch. So I believe, first of all, there are 3 banners with a lot of great banners here. There should probably be 2 more, one that says harvest and another that says utilize, but they wouldn't have the meatball on them. They would just be here as part of the flow, because that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. We have to be able to create something that is a sustainable program that shows returns, both economic, educational, national, in terms of defense of the planet. And that kind of program is one that would be able to stand up to these activities a lot better. And it's something that it has to be sellable on all these different levels. And it has to, as somebody said in one of the earlier presentations, it has to be kept sold. And certain programs that are being put out and ideas that are being put out just don't fit that. So the overall broader partnerships that we can create, the ones that show both economic and cultural returns, are the ones that are going to be the ones that succeed in the long run. And if we don't pay attention, we will end up in the special rocket-shaped garbage can of Congress, because they need to see these things, and White Houses need to see these things, and they need to go beyond the time-based parochial interests of every administration that comes in redefines space. One administration, it's the moon. One says it's Mars. One says it's asteroids, been there to the moon, et cetera, et cetera. So there needs to be an overarching goal that goes beyond all of those, and the constituencies need to be broad enough to keep the activity going through those seismic shifts that occur. Now, NASA needs to do certain things. It has a mandate to do certain things, including data, space exploration operations, and planetary defense. And obviously, anybody on the inside or even close to the inside knows that that's the ultimate goal, is going to Mars. Whether NASA gets there first or Musk gets there first, we're going to Mars. And there are a lot of activities that are considered by some to be doglegs from that. I'm not interested in ripping a leg off a dog. I don't know where that analogy came from, but I wouldn't mind hitching extra dogs to the sled to take us into the unknown. And we believe that NEOs serve that by helping us do different things in space. Keep in mind, to get to any of these destinations, you have to cross the ocean of space. You have to go through what we call free space to get there. And on the way, it would be nice to be able to utilize what you can find there, those resources, to build your habitats, find your fuel, propellant, and in the meantime, we can be doing other activities such as helping communication satellites extend their life, things like that. So there's a lot of possibilities. And if we can learn to live off the land, it's absolutely the key. We're working the transportation equation right now. We're getting a government. There are 3 legs to opening a frontier. Having a government that's not in your way, or at least not in your way, and probably helping. Getting cheap transportation to and from the frontier, and learning to live off the land. And that's what we're all about. So I'm going to hand this over to David.
So of the 3 locations for space-based resources, 2 of them are at the bottom of gravity wells. And therefore, when you do resources on the moon, it primarily serves lunar activities. Same for Mars, it primarily serves Martian activities. But when you get your resources in free space, you serve all those destinations plus Earth orbit. And we tend to envision the Asteroid initiative as an enabler for lots of space activities rather than as a destination. And so we propose an initiative for commercial asteroid development that joins what NASA needs with what industry can get from asteroids, pooling the goals and technologies, and being able to develop a more robust space exploration system. And also in the process, as I'll talk about later, really enhancing planetary defense. So what we propose is the ICAD to be modeled primarily on COTS and the ILDD that Chris Lewicki talked about. The idea is that you go with a fixed price approach and a below cost approach to ensure that there's private investment. You get paid on milestones rather than a monthly cost plus invoice. NASA decides to buy what it needs, and then industry will fund additional capabilities to serve commercial markets. Just like with COTS, NASA specified we need this much tonnage and potentially these crew replacements done, and SpaceX and Orbital Sciences could come up with a vehicle that did that, plus what was necessary to make it an attractive commercial activity. And the benefit of taking this approach is that it's sustainable. Those activities like Falcon 9 will continue to operate even if the space station contract eventually goes away. So, the agency specifies its need, provides tech dev, and purchases data, and the private sector both develops technologies and chooses which technologies need to be developed. It shapes the operation, and if there are multiple suppliers, NASA gets a competitive base to buy its needs from. This produces lower costs, as SpaceX showed. Not only was the total cost of getting Falcon 9 created lower than possible under standard contracting, industry participated in paying that lower cost. As Rick mentioned, if you have a commercial asteroid initiative, you can cut off the dog leg, hand it to industry, and keep NASA focused on going to the moon and Mars. And it also results in resources for frontier, living off the land and being able to stay in space once you get there. We like to emphasize that first, do no harm. NASA ought to focus on having scouting missions for industry, and that should be the first action under a commercial asteroid development initiative. And these small vehicles also, in the next phase, could do sample returns to reduce the great levels of uncertainty that exist with what anyone will find when you try to go to an asteroid for returning large quantities. And this, I think, might be one of the most important points for selling asteroid activity to Congress and the general public. You know, your planetary defense can be almost free. It becomes a profit center, learning how to inspect, intercept, and manage asteroids, because the asteroid industry needs to do that in its normal course of business. If you have a robust industry doing asteroid recovery activities, you'll have the hardware and the people already in space for faster response. You know, you'll have lots of Bruce Willises already working in space. You won't have to have a crash program to suddenly develop them and launch them. So I think when you position asteroid activity politically, we really need to focus on you get planetary defense almost for free. The other benefits are much broader science. You know, as on Earth, the resource industry, coal and oil and gas, has learned so much about the structure of the Earth's crust that is paid for by commercial activities. And if these things are done on an industry basis, we can do things that NASA cannot. Charlie's done a great thing to take over the exploitation rights of the solar sail project. With an industry-led project, though, the actual activities themselves can be tweaked. New things can be added to the baseline mission that support public engagement. So, in summary, we think that it ought to be a program that starts with buying scouting data, and in parallel, put out a BAA for industry ideas and how NASA and the private sector could actually carry out the asteroid redirection mission. And soon move into a phase where you seek competitive bids to be able to bring back asteroids in a manner that serves NASA's needs and also provides a continuing resource in Earth orbit that can be turned into useful products for expanding the frontier.
You'll notice nowhere in there do we talk about abandoned in place, surplus, or prizes. We are talking about analogies, the ILDD and the COTS approach or partnership. This is the big plan, this is the big goal, and yes, there are 2 asteroids rotating around that big red planet. But that's the big goal. That's where I think most of NASA and a lot of the citizens of the country want to go. We have our plans, and some of us are free spacers. We believe that if we can get together, we can do what we need to do, and our merchant marine can help support the opening. I won't say conquest of Mars, but I think it can be a joint partnership, and I think there's a lot to be said for all of us working together in these ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick and David. And next, we should have Eric Mumm from Honeybee Robotics joining us virtually. Is he on the line?
Yes, I'm here. I guess.
Excellent.
Okay. So I wanted to focus today on robotic technology development and maturation of the robotic systems and tasks that would be required for a bold mission like this, and talk about how some of the facilities and capabilities that Honeybee brings to the table, and how that dovetails well with some great facilities and capabilities, personnel at NASA, and how we can mutually work together to jointly develop not only a robotic system that can be successful, but also a ground test bed that we can use to validate these technologies. So the first thing I'm going to focus on are some of the relevant Honeybee technologies that fold into this narrative. So For those that don't know, Honeybee has been developing robotic systems, end effectors, sampling systems for the Mars program, lunar exploration, and even asteroid and comet sampling. So we've been on every landed mission since MER. MER, we provided a rock abrasion tool or a grinding tool that's featured in this slide. We provide 2 mechanisms for Mars Phoenix lander, and then we've got 2 systems on Curiosity right now. So we've got a pretty good history of working with NASA on developing robotic systems and performing great in situ science. So I've got kind of a generalized slide deck because we've got presentations across multiple topics, and this is the one that we had authorized to release. So I'm going to skip through this pretty quickly, and again, just highlight some of the relevant technologies that Honeybee brings to the table. So we've been developing robotic drills, planetary drills for sampling powders and taking cores for Mars, Moon, asteroids, and comets. We've got probably a collection of 10 or so prototype drills and sampling systems in our Pasadena, California facility. Those are systems that are available for continued technology development and demonstration for not only performing some in situ science on an asteroid, but perhaps even placing anchors robotically for taking samples to perform in situ science and placing anchors in an asteroid to minimize the EVA activity once in lunar orbit. There's a lot of utility for robotic systems that could offload from the human aspect of characterizing and exploring an asteroid. So we've got a great facility and a great set of prototype hardware, pretty high TRL hardware available to perform near-term demonstrations and feasibility studies. Pneumatic sampling techniques. So we've also developed some capturing mechanisms, docking mechanisms for satellite servicing, but these can be applied to this mission context as well, insofar as specifically this lasso system can be used to capture boulders or capture samples on an asteroid and pull it back to the spacecraft. Whereby we can do some in situ science, all robotically. This could even be scaled up to capture the asteroid in its entirety. And so, those are a couple of the top-level, key technologies that we see as relevant in this mission concept or context. And with regard to participatory engagement. First, we maintain a nice facility out in Pasadena, California, where, as I alluded to earlier, we're developing various planetary drills and sampling technologies and the associated environmental test chambers required to validate some of these technologies in a relevant environment. And so we maintain, 3 chambers. You can see one very large chamber here on the left side of the screen that we use for some of our deep drilling demonstrations in a relevant environment. And the facility also has an extensive materials analog or analog materials library. So we've got planetary simulants such as JSC1, FJS1, GRC1, and many targets or rocks that are good analogs to what we might encounter on the surface of an asteroid. So we maintain this capability within the Honeybee umbrella, and I'm pleased to report that we have recently started engaging on the government side the Satellite Servicing Capabilities Office at Goddard Space Flight Center. And I know Bo spoke earlier. but they maintain a wonderful facility there at Goddard, whereby we can not only validate certain robotic technologies, such as grasping or capturing a boulder or capturing a large object, but also manipulating that large object. So maybe we place anchors in the large object, or we drill and sample, and so we see a nice culmination of capabilities here between Honeybee and our government counterpart, in this case Goddard Space Flight Center, and leveraging their vast expertise in robotic servicing and their amazing test beds, along with our expertise in robotic drills, robotic end effectors, and again some of the sampling techniques and the anchoring techniques and the geotechnical expertise that will be required when interacting with an asteroid. And so, this is we feel a fine example of a nice, private and government collaboration that should absolutely be exploited. To buy down risk and to demonstrate technology and to mature technologies that'll be necessary to pull off a bold mission such as this. So. That, I think, about wraps it up. I'm at my 10-minute time limit, so that's all I have. I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Eric. And ask that you would stay online as we now move into our question phase for this group. Let me throw it out to Joe. Do we have anything coming in? Yeah. You have a mic for Joe?
Thanks. So this one is actually to Chris, Planetary Resources. It's from Clinton Clark Online. The question is, if NASA focuses on prize money for funding of an asteroid study capture, how would that affect your business model or your competition, or your competitors, rather, business models?
All right, thanks for the question, Quentin. The availability of NASA's interest in prospecting missions and to provide a funding source for that type of stuff is a good augmentation to commercial opportunities that already exist. What it allows us to do is to engage with NASA in a specific need that they have and define requirements for that so that we can pursue that as an explicit line of business. Without something like that, we're kind of left wondering what NASA's objectives are and whether they may choose to meet them themselves, or if, in this example that I laid out, and it was laid out in other presentations this morning, can allow some well-defined collaboration with commercial capabilities that's coming online.
Thank you.
I think we should look at prizes in terms of the track record so far. If you contrast that with COTS, NASA paid SpaceX roughly 90% of the COTS contract before their first launch, and they now have a successful rocket. If you look at the Google Lunar X Prize, which pays initially zero prior to success, and the ILDD companion contract that NASA came up with, it was perhaps 10% prior to launch. None of the Google Lunar X Prize teams are in particularly good shape, and there's great doubt as to whether any of them will actually be able to get to the moon by the deadline. So I think in terms of asteroids, we ought to lean towards the COTS approach and lean away from the prize approach.
Hi, maybe this is for David and Rick or for Chris. I was wondering if you thought that partnering with NASA or help from NASA with issues that may be related to the Outer Space Treaty in the long run is important, or is that not important to your business case in the long run?
I can address that question. So with regard to the Outer Space Treaty and the peaceful uses of outer space, the issue is often frequently one of rights of extraction and mineral rights. And we, of course, have seen that used by many different nations, including the United States, in the collecting and returning of samples for scientific use. In partnering with NASA for obtaining those materials, perhaps eventually for science use, but as a result of a business transaction, this is an area where we can really clarify this area of the Outer Space Treaty and continue to set precedent in how it outlines and defines and allows this type of peaceful activity in space, even in the case of commercial interests.
I think we could use NASA's help in making sure that the space lawyer community is following practice rather than declaring what practice should be. Chris in the past has made the analogy to fishing in international waters. Those fish are the common heritage of all mankind, but once they're in the hold of your ship, they're obviously yours. You can bring them back to port. I'd like to try that approach for asteroid resources to start. I guess my greatest fear is a space lawyer tsunami cranking up with lots of bright ideas of how to structure everything before we've done anything.
I just wanted to weigh in on that as well. I think that several of those treaties, the early treaties, were written in terms of nation states as opposed to private companies. Nobody even thought that private companies would be engaging in space activities at that point, and we need to be cautious in the sense that if a nation state in the form of NASA is undertaking certain activities, that it doesn't trigger reactions that then trickle down and inhibit the private sector from doing what we want to do. There are people, and I shared a thing in London recently, and we had somebody pop up and say, well, we are in, I think it was Pakistan, and he said, it was an interesting refrain from the 60s and 70s, and he said basically, we deserve a piece of the wealth that you're going to create in space. I guess just because we're human beings on the planet with you. I think that can be handled more in a private sector realm by the fact that the obvious best way to distribute wealth on the planet that seems to be working most effectively is the free enterprise economic system. And many of the foes and the people that were in the quote-unquote non-aligned movement in the 60s and the 70s where these treaties were drawn up now find themselves, for example, China and the entrepreneurs in China on the other side of things. So there are different ways to look at it now than were originally intended by those treaties. And I think NASA can encourage a conversation, but make sure that it itself does not become the point of the argument by being a national entity engaging in these activities.
So I guess I applaud you guys in the effort to open this new industry. I can clearly see the parallels between what NASA's doing in terms of scouting and why scouting is important for you guys and why you would like to play a role in NASA's efforts to do that. But moving past that, opening a new mine is a very expensive thing, and opening new industry is very expensive. It requires a lot of investment, and I think we'd like to believe that there's potential private investment to open this new industry. My question really is, what can we do now to make investors more likely to help you and open that industry? What needs to happen before those investors will come on board? Do we need to prove mining technology? Do we need to find 1,000 rocks we can bring back? What is the key thing that needs to happen now to make that new industry start?
I think investors look primarily at, will you have a market for what you're doing? They have some faith that if there is a market, you'll find the technical solution to serve that market. So in terms of NASA, in the past, when NASA's been planning Mars missions, ISRU, in-space ISRU has played a relatively minor part because it's not yet proven. And so instead, there's envisioned, 10 giant launch vehicles to get one Mars mission done. If NASA could officially declare and acknowledge, we're not going to Mars unless we get resources in space, because there's no way we can afford 10 SLSs in 1 year to do a Mars mission. That provides one more marker for there is a customer, in addition to ComSats, in addition to Bigelow Aerospace, for large quantities of space resources. I think that would be the most helpful thing.
Do you want to
I'd like
jump
to
in,
comment on
Chris?
this as well. This is an excellent question in terms of what government spending ultimately can do in creating a foundation and an infrastructure which helps overall sustainable exploration of space and indefinite presence in space. All mining, of course, starts with prospecting, and whether that prospecting has been done by NASA scientific missions or if it has been done by commercial missions, that information helps connect the vast meteorite database we have on Earth with specific bodies out in the solar system. NASA increasing its efforts and doing as it has been done with the NEOWISE restart, the considering of repurposing Kepler for asteroid surveys, and the funding of new technology like NEOCAM and Space Act agreements with groups like B612 and the Sentinel to increase the rate of discovery. We've only found less than 1% of all these objects. But perhaps the most important thing that could be done with the way that we are laying out an infrastructure in our exploration of space is an infrastructure that leverages those resources that are already out in space, creating an architecture that uses fuel depots, that develops that technology, that creates a network between here and Mars and other destinations where those resources can be sourced from where it makes the most sense, maybe from the surface of the Earth, maybe from the Moon, maybe from the asteroids. And as we've seen in the past, it is some parts government, some parts private industry, and I think in this particular case, in developing the solar system economy, it'll be no different.
Just to weigh in on that with Chris, and I think as an industry of two companies now, we share a lot of the same opinions. The questions really get into, this is an organic dance that we can engage with in the government, and it is really making sure that we all know where we're supposed to put our feet so we don't step on each other in the dance. And in terms of an ARM, NASA developing, as we saw last night, the through JPL and others, the ability to go out and grab things in bags and stuff like that, that's an appropriate government role as far as I could see. That's great, research development that helps lead the way. I won't get too far into the subject of whether I believe NASA should be the one going out to grab the asteroid, on the other hand, because pacing and pricing as set by the government is going to be different than that's going to be set by the private sector. However, if NASA can play the customer role and determine that in advance, it's going to be a customer, kind of emphasizing what both Chris and David said. If we look at, for example, during the era of the space shuttle, great vehicle that it was, amazing system that it was, the government was providing an operational industrial transportation role. With the space shuttle out of the picture and it now being clear that the government's going to buy its payloads and services from the commercial sector can go out and build in that direction, and both parties win. The government in the end will have lower cost and more reliable multi-source transportation systems, and the private sector will have a market that it can go out to and leverage the investment that it gets. By the same token, if NASA downstream does declare, as David mentioned, that it is going to be buying resources, buying data, buying these things, and the lines are clear that that's going to be there, then we can go back to investors and say, look, there are customers in the form of government downstream. The government, in turn, can look at its budget estimates and say, you know what, we're going to be able to save X amount because these are going to be commercially provided services, as in the case of commercial transportation to and from orbit. So it really is a dance that goes on between both sectors if we can basically agree on the music, the tempo, and the pace, and where we step.
Anything, Joe? Okay. Any other questions? We're coming up at the top of the hour for our next break. All right, why don't we hold it there? We'll take another 10 minutes and be back with our third and last group of panelists, and then open it up to discussion. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you in 10.